What's up, YouTube? Yesterday, over 1,000 of you guys stayed on for an hour as we walked down a private event speech that I gave, and I redid the speech just for Instagram Live and YouTube for you guys. And so what we cover in the video is one, the content creation model that we've used to grow over 1 million person audience over the last 6 months, number one. Number two is how to position yourself in your messaging so you don't sound like a dick. Number three, the concept behind giving away the goodwill and then selling the implementation, because a lot of people feel like they have to keep their best stuff hidden, when the reality is you got to give it all away, and then you'll always get so much more than you think you will. Number four was the 3 traits of ultra successful people that I've seen, of all the people that I know who are worth $1 billion and more. They have these 3 traits in common, and they're not exactly what I expected them to be. The next one is the best way to scale a sales team, because that was one of the questions I got in the chat, and I was really excited to talk about. So I broke down the entire process of how we've scaled. The next one is discussion around closing, because now we went from the big team down to like, how do I actually get people to say yes? And the 3 frameworks that I use to walk someone across the finish line, how I deal with failure, and then finally, I gave you a little bit of a sneak peek on the next book. All right, so hope you enjoyed the live from yesterday, and I'll see you on the inside. I'll give you guys want the scoop on what the presentation was? If you guys can throw like some hearts or some thumbs up. Okay, cool. So I'll give you the kind of the overarching theme, which was, the first third of it, I had to bring everyone up to speed who didn't know, what our deal was. But in the last 6 months, we've grown from like 180,000 person audience across like all channels to like 1.2 million now in the last 6 months. So it's been a lot of growth, and I mean, no one's experienced it more than me, and so I'm very grateful. So that's all you guys, so thank you so much. I'm really honored. And so kind of explain that, and then the second portion was kind of like the tactics, which is like, what did we actually do to do that? And I'll cover that in a second. And then the third part was my observations on like the things that worked big picture, rather than like the blocking and tackling like hacks and things like that. So let's go into kind of section 2, which is the tactics. So there's kind of a 5-step process that we've been doing, and Caleb's been helping me out with this, but basically we test first. And so this works for you, because I used to email myself. I don't know if you guys are like I am. I used to email myself like brain dump, like if I had an idea or a conversation or someone was, and I was like, I didn't want to lose it, I would just email to myself, and this never ending thread of like me to me. I don't know if you guys have that. And then when I go record content, I would look at that thing, and then I would try and come up with my content ideas. But what I discovered was I could use Twitter as my brain dump, and take basically the same amount of time as I would to email myself with the context and whatnot. But I could just do it on Twitter. And then what would happen is what used to be a private, communication became a public thing. So I was able to share something that otherwise wasn't being utilized. And then the added benefit was Twitter and like TikTok, I would say, are similar in that they're very fast testing. Like you can post 10 times a day and it doesn't like hurt your account. Whereas, Instagram, people were like, hey man, I've seen enough of your stuff. Like 1 post a day is fine or whatever. And so on there, you can post plenty of times, and then you get to see the engagement, because both of those platforms are very like viral ready. It's so easy to share and whatnot. And so from those, we see the best performing content. And then that is what I then use to create, to basically record videos off of. So tweets turn into videos. The threads turn into long videos. The short tweets turn into shorts. And then that becomes, from there, we record those things. Step 3 is we add call to actions to them, which is something that we actually just recently started doing. So you'll probably see it more in these videos and stuff in the future. But we just started doing it to my podcast. If you haven't checked that, if you are an Audible person or an audio person, the Game podcast, if you didn't know we have a podcast, has just grew from like 20,000 downloads a month to 400,000 downloads a month, which is like insane. So you guys are awesome. I love you. I'm glad that it's providing value. But the biggest thing that we did to get the growth was literally just saying like, hey, if you like this, like leave a review and share a friend. And so we started doing that, and then that's when everything just blew up, which makes sense, because like the book, for example, had a ton of virality to it because there was call to actions embedded within the book. And so we just took like what we already know works within business. We need to be reminded more than we need to be taught, and just applied it to something that I'm not as familiar with. Like I don't consider myself like a content creator. Like we do business stuff, and like we try and capture as much as we can. And so doing that, we started interjecting in 3 places: the beginning, the middle, and the end. And if it's longer, you can do a couple mid-rolls. And so what we did to operationalize that was we took like, what are all the call to actions you would have, right? Because you don't want to always be the same thing, because then people get like banner blindness. So it's like, for me, it's like, hey, check out the book. It's 99 cents. You can go download it. Go check it out. It's got 5,000 5 stars. Like people seem to like it. Hey, leave a review. That would be awesome. Tag me in this. or send this to a friend. So that'd be a share ask. Hey, if I have an event coming up, which I don't, but if I had an event coming up, or if I was like, hey, I'm going to do a workshop with like, 5 entrepreneurs over, $1 million a year, then I would just point people to something like that. If you had a lead magnet, that would be one of those things. And so you get the idea, like wherever you want to direct traffic, that would be the call to action. But here's the shtick, or here's the thing, that the nuance that made it work, is that rather than just doing one, do like 5 for each one of them. And then you've got like 30 of these that you can sprinkle in. And then they seem really organic. And because I'm doing them really short, they're only like, 5 or 10 seconds. They're not like these 3-minute long ads that everyone wants to kill themselves and just immediately skip until they get to the end of the ad, right? And so it's like little call to actions that are small enough that people actually hear them, and different enough that you don't get like audio blindness. And so that was step 3. Step 4 was contextualize. And so what I did in the presentation, I showed this image. You guys remember the meme that was like Dolly Parton, that she started it? It said like me on Facebook, me on Tinder, me on Instagram. If you guys, is this cool? You guys like, otherwise I'll just be ranting on my own. Okay, cool. Do you guys want me to do more of this? Because Caleb, we have a bet. I was like, no one's going to show up. And if someone showed up, then I would lose the bet, which is probably a very one-sided bet I should not have taken. But anyways, so Dolly Parton, there's Tinder, LinkedIn, all that stuff, right? So that was the meme. And so if you look, and I have this visual, if you look at a lot of my tweets, a lot of them became TikToks. And then from that short TikTok, I have a YouTube Shorts version and I have an Instagram version. And the thumbnail and the text are contextual to the platform. And so you guys have probably seen people who like take a TikTok and then just like post it, the same thing with the TikTok watermark on Instagram, or they take the same TikTok watermark and they put it on YouTube Shorts and they have the same like caption and whatnot around it and same thumbnail. I think that people feel that like you didn't take the extra little bit, and this could be me judging, I don't know, I'm just sharing what worked for us. And so we try to make it contextual to the platform, and I think that's been helping. And so that's step 4. So test on Twitter, record shorts as shorts, long as longs, add the call to actions to drive the action you're looking for, drive the traffic wherever you want. 4 is you contextualize to the platform that you're distributing on, and then step 5 is to actually distribute it. And this is the little lesson that I learned. And so I shared this, I think, on my YouTube channel, but I had a conversation with Greg Cardone, I don't know, 6 months ago, and this is actually what was probably the big impetus, catalyst for this happening, for me ramping up everything. He said, look at your Instagram, bro, look at my Instagram. And I was like, okay. And he's like, volume, bro. He's like, I'm posting 5 times more than you are. And he said, look at your Twitter, look at my Twitter, look at your YouTube, look at my YouTube. And it was just such a stark contrast in terms of the amount of content that he was putting out compared to me. And then it became really obvious. And so what ended up happening is we went from posting 7 times a week, which was 3 YouTube videos a week, 3 podcasts a week, and 1 Instagram post. That was all I was doing. And we went from 7 times a week to 80 times a week across all platforms. And so it was a 10x increase in content. But here's what's interesting. We didn't get a 10x increase in quantity. We got a 10x increase in growth rate. So the actual net result went from 180,000, which had taken us 12 months to build, to getting to 1.2 million in 6 months of building. And so the rate of growth 10x'd. And so literally the input was equivalent to the output in terms of the equivalence between those things. So right now, if you're thinking to yourself, man, I would love to grow 10 times faster. So whatever your growth rate is on any platform, if you're thinking about it, I will bet you, I don't know if it'll be a dollar to dollar increase or a 1-to-1 increase, but I'll bet you if you do more, you won't get less. And so you can take that promise to the bank. And so when I started doing that, that's when we saw this explosive growth. And the thing is I told this other story that hopefully you guys won't mind me sharing with you. You guys cool just getting like some of the nuggets from the event? Cool? Okay. I had a mentor really early on when I had my gyms that told me to start putting flyers out, right? And so I listened to him and I put flyers out and I waited a few weeks, nothing happened. I went back to lunch with him and I was like, hey, we did the flyers thing. It didn't work. And he was like, what do you mean? I was like, well, I mean, one guy called me, but he said I dinged his car. It was a Mercedes, and I just tried to talk to him really nicely and get him off the phone. And he's like, well, what was your test size? And I was like, what do you mean? He was like, well, how many did you put out? I was like, oh, I put 300 out. He's like, 300? I'm like, yeah. It's like, dude, I don't even test for less than 5,000 flyers. And I was like, oh, well, that explains it. He's like, and then we do 5,000 a day once we have a winner. It's like, oh. And so that wasn't even like 2x or 5x or 10x. It was 20x. And that was a per day, not in total. So if you did at the end of that month, you would have put up 150,000 flyers, and I put up 300. And so I'm looking at the difference in results between this really successful business person and myself, and I mistakenly thought that the issue was the strategy rather than the execution. And so one of the number one things that I feel like I get in my DMs all the time is like, hey, I've been doing the rule of 100. And if you guys don't know what that is, it's my like little shtick for if you do 100 primary actions a day to promote your business or make your products and services known, you will get more business. Which means if you do 100 cold calls, you do 100 cold emails, you do 100 DMs, whatever that is, you do 100 of that primary action per day, or if it's ad spend, spend $100 a day, whatever it is, or you do 100 a week if it's actual organic content. I promise you will have more business than you know what to deal with. Your problem will not be demand generation. It will be satisfying the demand that you have to handle. And so the thing is that people hear that. They hear the rule of 100. And I had a guy literally message me and said, hey, I've been doing the rule of 100. I just crossed 100. I started 8 weeks ago. And I was like, what do you mean you started 8 weeks ago and you crossed 100? He was like, well, I mean, I've done 100, reach outs over the last 8 weeks. I was like, bro. So 7 times 8 is 56 times 100 should have been 56,000 reach outs in that same period of time. And hopefully you're catching the drift here that it's not these like 2x, 3x increases in volume. It's typically multiple orders of magnitude. It's not 10x, it might be 100x or 300x in the case of the flyers, or 56,000 versus 100 in that same period of time. And the issue is that most people dramatically underestimate how much effort is required to achieve goals that are dramatically above what the norm is experiencing. And so it's like right now, if you're getting normal results, it's usually because you're putting out a normal level of output, which is almost non-existent because everyone's so afraid of someone leaving a mean comment. The amount of mean comments that I get is unworldly. The amount that it influences me because is low. And that's for a variety of reasons I'm going to get into. It's mostly because I love you guys. You guys are awesome. So you guys bury those comments. And so Mosey Nation, you guys rock. Thank you again. And so that was section 2 of this thing. You guys want to hear section 3? I can give you guys the shtick. Okay. So section 3, the consolidated version of this, and I'm still like working on it. So this was like the thing that made this uncomfortable for me because I think if I were to redo the entire presentation would have been section 3 altogether. And it just would have started there and then gone down because everything that I shared with you, although it's incredibly important, probably lacks the one thing that I think matters most, which is that most people are talking about shit that they have not done. And the way that they talk about it makes people hate them. Let me explain. So if I said, for example, let's say, all right, let me try and paint it differently. So let's say that you're on your newsfeed. Who here sees people shaking their finger and telling them what they should do on their newsfeed all the time, right? Plenty of people. Now, how many times have you seen the 18-year-old relationship coach who's on your newsfeed trying to sell coaching for relationships, right? The dating expert that's 21 years old, right? Have you guys seen this? Can I get like some hearts or some thumbs going if you guys have seen this? Right. It's ridiculous. Why is it ridiculous? Because there's an unspoken question that must always be answered, in my opinion, which is, why should I listen to you? And so I think the common reason that people are not experiencing the growth and the brand and the authority that they wish to build is because they're putting their ladder against the wrong wall. They're trying to build something that they do not have the authority to pursue. And so, for example, if you wanted to build a business brand, right? If you look at the biggest influencers in the business space. So you look at Andy Frisella, you look at Gary Vee, you look at Patrick Bet-David if you're a YouTuber, you look at Ed Milet, right? You look at these guys. A really important question is how many of them needed the social media following they have in order to make the money they make? None. And so they have the authority to talk about business because of the shit they have already done. And so it's kind of like, and I hear this all the time, it's like, man, my content's so much better than that guy's. I can't believe people, share that guy's stuff. If Elon Musk tweets, I'm on the porcelain throne right now, it'll get 500,000 shares. And it's not because of the content, it's because of the frame and the brand that is wrapped around that message. It's because Elon said it that made it important, right? And so the idea is it's very difficult to deliver theoretical knowledge on business without having the proof or the evidence to substantiate the theoretical knowledge you're claiming to have, because it doesn't pass the litmus test of like, why should I listen to you? Why should I listen to the $10,000 a month business coach? Why wouldn't I listen to Tom Bilyeu? Because people are like, well, I'm making the same stuff as Tom. And I'm like, yeah, you are. I was like, except you're missing the one thing where you build $1 billion brand. Small thing that you're missing, right? Where you've got the stay-at-home wealth coach, right? That's talking about how you should dollar cost average into the stock market and being like, dude, I'm giving way better advice than Warren Buffett is. And like, maybe you're saying the exact same thing as Warren Buffett. It's not fair that Warren Buffett gets all this media and you don't. Except for the fact that he's built $100 billion in net worth and made so many people wealthy through Berkshire Hathaway. Like, there's just that little itty bitty wrinkle that's missing. And so if that sounds hopeless to you, there is good news. So the point is that first, identify if you're doing that. If you are, probably stop. The second thing is that you change the way you speak. All right. And so changing the way you speak comes in terms of how you talk and what you're talking about. So what you're talking about, the way to be unfuckwithable so that people can't shoot you down, who can't give you hate, is by saying, listen, I don't know. This is just what I did, and this is what worked for me this time. I hope it serves you. Versus, this is what you need to do to get what I have, or this is what you need to do in order to do X. It's the difference between how to how I. So you start your message with how I built a $13 million a month company, not how you can build a $100 million company. It's minor, but it's huge, right? It's kind of it's almost like the difference of saying like, hey, do you want to buy my shit versus, hey, do you know anybody who wants to buy my stuff? It's these tiny little pivots in language that have deep implications behind your intention of how you're speaking to them. When you say you should or how to, you're presuming a place of authority that you may not have earned. Whereas if you're always coming from the place of like, I had oatmeal for breakfast, right? No one's going to object with you on that. You're like, I had oatmeal for breakfast. But if you say, you should have oatmeal for breakfast, if you want to look like me, how much more do you hate me now? A lot. And it's just a difference in language. And so the idea is that we change the way we talk and what we talk about. And so rather than talking about the general ideas of an industry, which we probably don't have the authority to presume because we don't have the experience, the depth of experience to make sure that our assumptions are valid across the sizes of business. Because you may make an assumption and you make a statement that works for a $10,000 a month business. And then everyone else is like, well, I can think of 100 ways that's wrong. And then you look like an idiot. But if you say, hey, this is how I've gotten to $10,000 a month, I hope this is helpful for you. No one's like, fuck that guy. That's not how he got to $10,000 a month. Because they don't know. They cannot challenge your experience. And if you want to make a pivot on that, you can say, hey, this is what I've been doing with John and Jim and Casey and Sarah to help them with their skincare condition, to help them with their home remodel, to help them with their XYZ. So I hope it helped you out because this is the framework we made for them and they seem to think it was useful. So I just wanted to share it with you guys. If you speak from that perspective, it's speaking from experience rather than theory. And most people who are talking right now are just taking Gary Vee's content, taking other people's content, diluting it, watering it down, and then delivering it from a position of weakness because you don't have the brand, and you don't have the authority, you don't have the expertise or the experience, real or imaginary, to make these claims. And so I think the heart of the issue is not, I mean, sure, there's the blocking and tackling of the volume and the distribution and contextualize the content, all that kind of stuff, right? There's all of that. And for sure, you have to do the doing. It has to get done. But the heart of it comes down to talking about things that you have the authority to speak over. And it reminds me of a speech from Morpheus from The Matrix, where he stands up, and I think it's in the second or third, I can't remember. And he stands up and he says, I stand here truthfully unafraid. He said, not because of the path that lies before me, but because of the path that lies behind me. Because no one can question the things that you have already done. No one can question the experience that you've amassed, even if it's this big. And the thing is it's about doing the first step and then talking about what you just did and what you just learned. And then taking the next step and then talking about what you did and what you just learned. Now, the maximized version of that is having a Caleb behind the camera and mic'd up all the time so we can capture. And we're going to be making more stuff for you guys on that because you guys asked for it, and we're building the team to try and deliver that for you guys. But that takes time and it costs money to do that. So I get that. And so I think that just doing the doing and then talking about what you did is one of the simplest way to document the lessons, learn how you progress and grow over time. And as a total side note, if you want to check this out, if you go on my podcast, which is actually the oldest platform I've been on, by the way, I have like almost 400 episodes on there. You can go back 6 years ago and listen to the difference in terms of like what I was talking about then and what I'm talking about now. And part of the reason that we document all this stuff, and the mission of the businessforacquisition.com is to document and share the best practices of building world-class companies, is that how shitty is it that Jeff Bezos doesn't have a vlog of him being like, day 37 at Amazon, trying to get these books shipped out, had some shipping issues today, but gonna get after it tomorrow. Like, how invaluable would it be if we could look back at Jeffy B's library of content and see him build one of the biggest companies of all time? Same with Steve Jobs, same with Elon Musk, right? And so my hope is that we get to $1 billion and beyond, and I hope that because I want to have the journey documented with the lessons that I learned along the way and the shifts in belief. Like earlier today, I got asked by somebody who listened to all my podcasts. They're like, hey, in podcast 86, which by the way was 4.5 years ago, they're like, you said this thing. And I was like, I think I've shifted my understanding of that. And so I was like, there's more nuance to it. And so it's really cool for yourself to document these things. And when you do it from that perspective, which is to do it for yourself, to do it because you believe it should be made, because you want to add to the body of knowledge rather than preach to somebody, to do it not because you want to feed your ego, but because you want to feed the audience. If you can do it from that perspective, then I think the audience can feel the intention. And so that kind of leads to what I would consider to be like probably one of the later points in the presentation, which is the whole concept around giving, which is, first off, humans are exceptionally good at sniffing out intention. And I think that's evolutionary and deeply wired in us because we have to know when we're getting double crossed. We have to know and try and be able to guess if someone's lying to us. And so we're actually very, very good. Like even people who have like necessarily like lower IQs or lower processing power still can have exceptionally good ability at sniffing out lying, can sniffing out intention, just sniffing out ill will. And so, because it's evolutionary, if you weren't able to do that, you get double crossed, you get your coconut stolen, right? And so we have this really innate, very tuned instrument inside of us that can hear intention in tonality and micro expressions. And so I don't think you can fake it. I think you just have to truly shift your perspective so that you can live in that way authentically, which is to actually believe that if you give to your audience over a long enough period of time, you will reap higher rewards. And so I want to be clear. Since day one, I've always been in it to make money. But I think that the vehicle that we use to make money is a longer game. And I got asked on, I think Evan Carmichael, the only other time I've been on Instagram Live, was like, hey man, why are you one of the good guys who, like, why haven't you like sold out or whatever? And I was like, well, first off, I want to be clear, we're equating selling with bad, which I would never do, number one. Number two is that I'm absolutely a capitalist and long-term greedy. It's just that I think that me working with companies thinking about my unique skills of getting someone from 3 to 30, 3 to 50 million is more valuable for me to work with a handful of people and just get everyone else stuff for free so that they can get to the level that I can then work with them, right? Rather than trying to build a massive infrastructure around, helping tens of thousands of people try and consume the content when I can just give it to them for free, right? Which leads to another big point that I have around this, or at least a belief that I have, which is give away the secrets, sell the implementation. And so a lot of people have info behind walls, and that's fine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But the real value add for the service is the implementation, the accountability, the troubleshooting, and the perspective from which to solve the problem. So I'll give you an example. So let's say you want to get better at sales, right? So I could make tons of sales content if I wanted to, and then people would be like, wow, this guy's really good at sales because I give away all the secrets, right? But they might consume it and be a little bit better, but they would be even better if they had a coach who's like listening to their calls and seeing like, see right here, you paused and then she lost trust with you. Or hey, see how here, you should have made this into a question rather than making a command. And if you did that, you could have sold more off your back foot than your front foot, right? Or like, dude, you missed rapport in the first 2 seconds because you said this instead of this, right? And then the whole call's been off since then. Or she said this objection early on, and then you didn't catch it, so she just detonated it in the sale, and you should have confronted that earlier, right? And so if you don't have the perspective from which to get better at the skill, because you already only have your baseline skill set, because you can't, it's very difficult to self-appraise, that is where having coaches, mentors, people who are better at teaching the skill comes into play. And so you give away the secrets to prove you are good, because here's the flip side. People are like, well, what if I give away all these secrets and everyone consumes them? Right? What if you give away a whole bunch of shit and everyone consumes it? Which one do you think you're going to make more money on? People make their purchasing decisions based on the value they've already received, not the value that they're going to receive. Like, it's a really big point that took me way too long to learn. one of the strongest persuasive powers in existence is reciprocity. If people get something, they feel almost like it's like sick to their stomach, they have to give something back, right? It's just most people are like, it's not everyone, there are some crazies out there, but most humans, because all of our civilization has been based on this concept of reciprocity, right? And so you can force reciprocity in your direction by just jamming so much goodwill and so much value down someone's throat that they just feel like they have to vomit back on you in terms of value because they're so full on value, they're like getting drunk with the value that you're providing for them. And so when you do that, it results in a sale. And I'll tell you one of the lessons that I learned later, and this has just at least been true for me, is that the end of your value ladder of the ascensions that you can create for a customer is predicated on the last thing that you provided that was in excess of value from what you charged. So if you think about the first thing you do is your content is free, it's worth more than what you're giving because you're giving away everything. And so then they purchase the first thing. And if that first thing, let's say is $1,000, but it makes them $10,000, they're like, well, fuck yeah, what else you got? And you're like, well, I got a $10,000 thing. And they're like, I'm in. And then they make $100,000. And they're like, dude, what else you got? And you're like, I got a $100,000 thing. And this is the part where people fuck up, is that at the $100,000 thing, they get $100,000 of value. And then what they have done is that they've now completely squeezed the price to value discrepancy. And what they have is not a raving customer, but a satisfied customer. And then that is where the customer relationship ends. And so the idea of being able to consistently and always have more demand than you can fulfill is predicated or is based on the ability to always provide not just a little bit more, but significantly more than you are charging for. And so there's two ways of doing that. One is you can decrease your price to the point where it's basically nothing. And so if you give anything over nothing, it seems more, which is why there's kind of the premise around free content. But the thing is that free content does have a cost. It's just not monetary. It's time and attention. How many people do you know who make content and they get no fucking engagement on it? It might be you. You might be that person. Why do you think that is? Because the price of free is still not worth it. Real shit, right? And so the idea is like, if you are in that situation, you make this free content, you say content doesn't work, and so you keep putting out shittier and shittier content because you keep saying that it doesn't work. I think if you can flip the script and say, hey, what if I made all of the stuff that I have that's free more valuable than what my competitors are currently charging for? What if I make my free stuff better than their paid stuff? And if you really, truly try and do that, not just like say that, but live that. Think about all the deliverables that happen. Think about all the checklist and the cheat sheets and the visuals and the videos and the in-depth trainings that you would provide if you were to try and teach a course. And what if you just gave that away? What happens if someone makes $100,000 a month using your free stuff? They fucking want to give you money to buy more from you. Reciprocity. And so as long as the next thing that you have can provide even more value, because probably if you were able to help them make $100,000 off of your free stuff, you probably have enough expertise to help them make $1 million, right? And so that's the idea here is like, how can we provide so much value in excess that they want to continue to buy from us over and over and over again, right? That's the shtick. And so when we're chunking back out to this, right, I said in the beginning, we've got our 5 method, right? We can test the right stuff, then we record the stuff, then we add call to actions to the stuff, so we direct the traffic where we want, we contextualize it to platforms, and then we increase our volume. That's the tactics. The heart behind it is that we think, I will only talk about the things that I know of that no one can question. I will talk about how I did something, not how to do something. I will talk about what my clients did, not what you should do. And I will base that from a perspective of I will try and give away as much as humanly possible, so much so that it makes me sick to my stomach and I'm very afraid of the amount of value that I'm giving. Because I know that based on reciprocity, if I give more value out there, I will get more in return. Because you can give at scale with content. So think about this. If it costs you the same amount to provide value in a video to one person as it does to provide value to 1 million people who watch a video, just think about it conceptually. It costs you no more effort to do that. But the beautiful thing with technology is that there's still only one of you to receive from everything that you did with leverage at scale. Like, I don't know if you can see this visual, but you do one level of effort, one input, and technology amplifies it to everyone. But then it all has to come back into one, which is you. And so this is how you can amass significant wealth. Like, this is how it works. So Caleb asked me the other day, he's like, dude, people say leverage all the time. He's like, what does leverage even mean? This is what leverage means. Leverage means the ratio between inputs to outputs in a system. And so if the input that we have is time or money, if we have something that has lots of leverage, it means we get a huge multiplier effect. If I put 1 unit in, I get 10 units out, I get 100 units out. That is a high leverage activity or system. And so the aggregation of wealth for people who have money is a function of understanding time, because wealth is based on the fundamental unit of money. Money is a foundational unit of time. Why? Because you can trade them back and forth. Everybody here can trade their time for money. It's an even exchange system. And so here's what's interesting. Everyone can trade time for money, but you can trade some time for more money, right? And so what we're doing when we gain leverage is we're looking at, and this is the people who are the wealthiest, is that they have control over their time so that when they do give it, they get the most out of it. Right? And so the game of business to aggregate wealth is to play with higher and higher and higher amounts of leverage over the one thing that we all have the same amount of, which is time. And so mastering that is the key to becoming wealthy. So you master your time in order to master your money. And so there's two components to mastering time. You have mastery of time, which comes down to the micro, which is the day-to-day, the speed of activity. And I can tell you right now, if you talk to somebody, you say, hey, we should do this thing, right? And then boom, they've got this organized, they've already done 2 or 3 messages, and then like it's getting done tomorrow. I guarantee you that that person is going to be more wealthy because they have a micro mastery of their time, right? On the map, actually, I'm gonna explain that one out even a little bit further. So think about this from an organizational perspective. Imagine that the default time period that you use to get something done is, let's say, a week. Let's say that's just the unspoken default. That's the cultural default of like, hey, we need to start this project. Hey, can you get this thing to me? They say, cool, I'll get you by end of week, right? End of week, that's the default. Everyone's okay with that, right? But let's say because you want to become a master of wealth and you understand that time is huge, is one of the biggest components of wealth, you then say, no, guys, the new default is end of day for all activities unless stated otherwise. That becomes the new norm. And so let's say that this project that we had originally has 7 back and forth interactions. They get something to you, it takes a week. You get them something back, it takes a week. Take a week, take a week, take a week. The whole thing takes 7 weeks, right? Now imagine it was end of day. The same output happens in 1/7 the time because we both get it done end of day. Next day, 2 things happen. Next day, 2 things happen. Next day, 2 things happen. And then boom, the project's done. And what took 2 months takes somebody else 4 days. And when you multiply that effect over a year, over a decade, that is when you see the outsized returns in wealth and money because of mastery on the micro of time. The second component of time is the macro perspective of time, which is, are all of the activities acting in alignment with my overall goal? And do I believe that they can compound on one another? Are they directionally aligned over a decade, over 3 decades, so that I can have a compounding effect, leverage in action, over a longer period of time so that my input is far less or my output far outweighs the input that I did because I let time work as an asset rather than a liability. Most people's plans when you add time get worse. What you want to do is play games where if you wait, you win. And so those are the games that we want to set up. And those are the games that the people who are truly wealthy understand. And so I can tell you, having dealt with people who make significantly more money than me, their mastery of the micro, of understanding how speed moves things forward, because on a macro scale of getting things done day, rather than week, means that at the end of the year, they have 40 times the output. And people are like, that's not fair. Who said life was supposed to be, right? And so this micro kind of exchange that happens there gets enhanced and magnified, and then people get upset about it. But the thing is you can either decry the system and hate on it, or you can accept it for what it is and just choose to play the game and win the way you want to, if that's what you want. And so as the micro, and then from the macro perspective, like I was saying earlier, is that the biggest shift that I see in people who are wealthy is that they talk in decades, not days. And I can tell you based on the time period that someone talks in when they talk about their plans, how wealthy they are. Or, to be fair, how wealthy they will be. And so if you have truly realistic plans that you're like, it'll take me about 10 years. If you hear someone say that, I can tell you that they're going to be successful. And if you can shift your perspective to that, where you actually start planning and like, okay, it would be unreasonable that if I did this for 10 straight years, that I wouldn't be significantly wealthier than I am today. So that's what I'm going to do. And then having the singularity of mind to not get distracted. And so there's 3 things They did a research study on this. I found this interesting. Hopefully you will too. Actually, you guys digging this? Because you guys good? Digging? And if you want, throw some questions in there because I'll wrap up my little diatribe here. There's 3 things that they found that made people who were ultra successful. And ultra successful, I wish I had the definition for what they define as ultra successful, but we'll just leave it at that. They said they have a superiority complex and they think that they are in some way better than other people and deserve more than others. Number 1. Number 2, they have massive insecurity and fear of failure. They never think that they will measure up or be good enough. Interesting paradox. And then number 3 is they have impulse control. And so think about this from a bigger picture perspective. They have the superiority complex, so they believe that they can accomplish these amazing things. Like some people, if you tell them your goals, they'll say, how dare you think that way? How dare you believe that you could accomplish something like that? And so it takes a little bit of delusion in order to think, I'm going to make an iPhone, whatever the fuck that is. I'm going to put a computer in everyone's hand in the world. I'm going to do that, right? Most people think it's hubris, and the only thing that separates genius and insanity is what happens, is outcome, right? And so they have this vision of where they want to go, and they believe they can do big stuff, number 1. Number 2, they have this fuel that they push away from always feeling they'll never be good enough, right? And that's what drives them towards this outcome. And then number 3, and this is the big one, this is the one that everyone messes up, is they have the impulse control to stay focused on it and not let shiny objects distract them. Even though there's another opportunity comes up 2 years in, they're like, no, if I keep doing what I'm doing and I follow the plan that I set, it would be unreasonable that I do not achieve the goal that I have. Could this help? Maybe. But even if I don't do that, I will still get there. And I would rather take the get rich for sure than get rich quick way every day. And most people, this is my finding at least, if you were to sit down with someone and say, here's a contract, you sign here and you're going to live on $30,000 a year for the next 5 years. But at the end of that 5 years, you'll be able to make $1 million a year. Most people would sign that contract, but they don't live like they would sign that contract. And so if you can, and the reason that contract works is because it delays the gratification. It separates the, I'm gonna have the cookie today from I wanna have the 6-pack for life, right? It's the, I will suffer for this long period of time. I will make the 100 dials. I will make the 100 pieces of content a week. I will spend the $100 a day on advertising and sacrifice my lifestyle in order to learn, not to get rich, but to learn the skills that will make me rich eventually. And I know that if I accumulate these skills because I'm dedicated to that and I'm willing to sacrifice more than other people to achieve my dreams, and I'm gonna put a pin on this real quick because I think this is real. How many of you, to save humanity, would sacrifice your life? Like throw like a like or a thumbs up or something like that. Like how many of you guys would give your life for maybe even your country, right? A lot of people would do that. A lot of our military, which we appreciate that you serve. Like how many people would do that? Or save your family? Pause. Why is it that is more important than your dreams? Because I was asked in an interview a few days ago, why were you willing to sacrifice so much? And I feel like the better question is, why are people not willing to sacrifice anything? It's like if you're willing to sacrifice your life, give the ultimate price for a country or for whatever, why would you not give at least that much to realize the potential that you believe you have? And so that's for me why the sacrifices never felt like sacrifices, they felt like trade-offs. And for me, they were trade-offs, they were prices I was willing to pay. And so it's like, if there was a pair of shoes that I wanted and it was $500 and I bought them and someone's like, don't you feel guilty about spending $500? I would say, no, that was the price and I was willing to pay because I wanted the shoes, period. And so if there's a price tag that we can ascribe to our dreams or to the potential that we believe that we have, which is what we want to pay down as regret in the future for not having it. If you read the price tag and it says, football with the boys, dodgeball during the week, drinking a couple of nights, so I'm a little bit groggier. If that's the price tag, is that a price that I'm willing to pay? And I think if you are, you'll get significantly closer to what you're trying to do. And so that was the general gist of the chat that I had. Not chat, it was a presentation of the presentation. You guys like that? Was that cool? I know you get a little bit of recap. I know this is not the normal style. This is the first Q&A ever. You can thank Caleb. Hopefully I won the bet, and he's not told me that anyone actually is live, so I could just be ranting at the iPhone right now. But if you guys have Q's or A's about any of that stuff, let me know in the chat, and Caleb will read them out to me, and then we'll rock and roll from there.
A common question we got is, what would be your number one tip for building a sales team?
Okay, number one tip for building a sales team is hire a very good sales manager. That's a very serious answer. Hire somebody who's already built a sales team. That's the real answer. The second and much harder answer is learn to sell yourself, learn to sell the product, train the next person to manage the product, read books on sales management, which comes down to communication cadence and managing a training process, a recruiting process, and then a management process. So there's three big things that have to happen in the sales team. You have to be able to recruit the right talent, which, by the way, let me just save you a lot of time. It comes down to much more of the picking than it does to the training, right? Because it's much easier to take somebody who's naturally great at baseball and get them better than get somebody who has zero eye-hand coordination and try and get them to become a pro. It'll take you 3 times as much time to get someone from a 2 to a 5 than it takes someone to take a 7 to a 9. All right. So number one is being able to spot good talent and recruit them onto your team. Number 2 is the training component, which is you need to get as specialized as humanly possible. And here's the key point that I think most people mess up in their sales training. They focus on the product, not the prospect. So the whole time they're trying to educate their team on the bells and the whistles and the things and the differentiators between them and the competition. Well, most of the time, the other people who are on the phone don't even know the competition, number one. Number 2, they don't even understand the features because they don't even understand the problem. And so what we should be talking about is, why are you here? What problem are we solving? And then we should have very deep context to what are the common issues that the prospect is suffering from. Because at the end of the day, the more accurately you can depict the pain someone is experiencing, the more you can enter the internal conversation and dialogue that's happening in their mind, the more they will believe whatever you have next. And so if I can perfectly describe what your situation is right now, just imagine that I was able to describe your life and the things that you suffer from right now perfectly. If I just described it all to you, you'd be like, geez, it's like this guy knows everything. And I'd be like, and that's why I think you're a good fit for the program. I wouldn't even need to tell you about the program, because you'd be like, geez, I mean, if he understands my problem that well, then I'm sure the solution will work. And so that's why also, from a flexibility standpoint, if you train your sales team on the prospect, you can swap products out as needed. But the prospect will probably not change. And so when we're training, so first we recruit the right people, we pick right. Right? So the championships are won in the draft, right? Not in the offseason. Number 2 is that we train around the prospect, not the product. And number 3 is that we manage around the values of the team and the headspace, and we manage towards one key thing, which is conviction. Because if you have somebody who's been recruited well and they've been trained on the pains of the prospect, the only reason someone's not going to be able to sell is because they lack conviction. Something happened. They got a text, they got a call, somebody's complaining about something, and all of a sudden their conviction drops. And you can see this because if someone was hot and then goes cold, it's not because they don't know how to sell, because they were hot, so they already know how to sell. It's because they stop feeling motivated to close. And so when someone gives them the initial objection, they shrink away because they don't believe that they're really helping the person. And so then they don't want to push any further. Because I can tell you, let me say this, imagine you went back in time and you were going to talk to your old self from 10 years ago, right? And you wanted to say, hey, there's this thing called Bitcoin. You should get into it and sell it on this day, all right? I know it means nothing right now. This is the day that you're going to sell it on. But here's the thing. If you went back in time, you had to not be you. You had to just come in another body. So to you, you're a perfect stranger, but you're talking to yourself. Think about how you would sell that person. That is what somebody with conviction sells like. And everything that they come up with, you'd be like, let's dive into this more. You're suffering from this. Let's pull these pieces apart. No, I think we do need to make a decision because every day, you'd start breaking it down. The way you would talk would change because of the level you were convicted. And a key point on conviction is not that it's binary. And this is a false thing that people say. It's not, do you believe in the product, do I not believe in the product? It's to what extent do you believe in the product? How deeply do you believe in the product? I'll ask you a question. Have you ever talked to somebody about something and they had some cockamamie, something that was insane, right? But they talked about it with so much conviction that you started to question your own beliefs because of how convicted they were. That is the power of conviction over any tactic in sales. And that's, again, the thing that I was talking about earlier with the intention, right? People can smell out intention. And so if you have the genuine, deep desire to help the prospect and you genuinely believe that this product or program or service is going to change their life, then selling gets easy. The hard part is doing that, which is why most of sales get fixed by fixing those things and not necessarily having some super insane program for training. You pick the right people, you teach them about your prospects, about the things that they're really struggling with, and you teach them to have a question-based conversation, which is, why are you here? What have you struggled with in the past? Why didn't that work? Okay, now that I've understood those things, I think you might be a good fit for our program. Can I tell you about it? Yes. X, Y, and Z. Does that make sense? Cool, we can move forward. It doesn't have to be complicated, right? Like that simple sales script is what we taught thousands and thousands of gym owners, and they closed millions and millions of, hundreds of millions of dollars in sales using that. Because the more complexity you add to the system, the easier it is to break. And so for me, I've always taught off question-based frameworks, because when you just ask questions, it always gives you a home base. So if someone goes out, they're all the way out in outer space, you got to bring them back. A question can always bring someone right back on point. You're like, thank you so much for sharing that. Boom, next question, right? You can walk them down towards the sale. So when scaling a sales team, best option is to hire an experienced sales manager who's done this before. If you can't do that, then you need to learn how to do the sale yourself, recruit someone who has the already ideally track record, work ethic, intelligence, candor to sell, and ideally in a selling environment that's similar to yours. If you're doing high volume transactional sales, then you want somebody who's done high volume transactional sales. If you're doing enterprise level sales, then you want somebody who's done a long sales cycle, who's probably more of a farmer than a hunter. It's different personality types. You got to make sure that you match those. So you start recruiting. Then you create a question-based framework just for the script, and the rest of the time you're educating them on the prospect, not the product. And then finally, from a management perspective, if someone is dipping, all of the effort goes towards raising their conviction, educating them on all of the things that we're doing to help our prospects succeed, giving them the testimonials, having live clients hop on and talk about how their life has changed, saying, hey, Dan, remember how you sold Johnny 2 weeks ago? Well, here's Johnny, and his life's totally different. Johnny, can you share your experience? All of a sudden, Dan now feels like the next guy he gets on the phone with is just like Johnny. And that is how you can fix someone's sales without even having to get into the nitty gritty. And sure, every morning you do your huddle, deal with the overcomes people are struggling with, make sure we drill stuff, do the role playing. You obviously have to do that. That's the blocking and tackling of selling. But if you want to build a world-class sales team, it comes down to the culture of conviction. So hopefully that answered that question.
What are 3 books that you would recommend people read?
I've only read one. So, real talk, I think it would be much better. So I have this YouTube video that says I was once weak. It's on my channel. I genuinely think it's the best. I think it's one of the best presentations I've ever given. And it's literally just about closing. And I think it's 90 minutes of just straight closes. And if you can understand that, and it shows you an ethical approach to closing, which is about giving the power to the prospect. Because the reason that people don't buy isn't because they don't want to buy, it's because they're afraid to make a mistake. And so what they do is they give their power away. And so there's 3 ways to give their power away. From the outside in, they give it to their circumstances first. So that's time, that's money, or that's some particular aspect of the program they don't like. So time-wise, I'm not going to get into all the overcomes here because it could go forever. But time-wise, we all know that it's not about time, it's about priorities, right? How can somebody become a self-made billionaire? You know what I mean? And we all have the same amount of time. So and I can give you the actual scripting around that, but just watch the video and it'll explain it. The second for circumstances is money, which is not about money. It's not about resources, it's about resourcefulness. So what's the difference between somebody who's broke and a billionaire who lost everything and then builds it back again? Well, both people have ground zero at one point, but the difference is that one person is resourceful, the other person isn't. And so it's not about resources, it's about resourcefulness. So right now, if you are broke, every self-made billionaire who was broke, you were in the exact same position as them. So which means it's not an excuse, which means if, let's say tomorrow you needed a $50,000 surgery, how would you come up with the money? How would you come up with it? And this is an easy question for everybody because this is what I think really drives it home. That sounds like a hypothetical. Who here is on the live right now? Mosi Nation. Love you guys, by the way. You guys digging this? Is this cool? Rocking? Okay. Who here has had an unexpected bill come up? Maybe something like maybe your car breaks down. Maybe you have a tax bill for my business owners. Any huge tax bills all of a sudden that came up? What about a payroll tax, for example, that you forgot that you weren't paying? Anybody? Or you have a major water breakage, right? You're still here. You still have a phone. You're still on Instagram right now. So you obviously survived. And here's what's interesting. We are willing to become resourceful when we feed someone else, but not ourselves. So when you had to pay your landlord and pay rent, you figured out a way. When you had to pay the tax bill, the IRS, you figured out a way. When you had to pay the bill for your car breaking down, you figured out a way. But for some reason, when it comes to investing in yourself, You're not. And so that's because people blame their circumstances rather than themselves. And so we peel this back, right? So we're having this conversation with the prospect. And so the three things: circumstances, so time, money, fit. So fit is like, I'll give you a simple example. They say, there's broccoli on this meal plan. I hate broccoli. I don't want to eat broccoli, right? And the easiest overcome there is just, you got to change to change. There's a lot of stuff that you can unpeel there, but you just simply say like, I mean, so many people are like, hey, well, I currently eat this for breakfast. Can I just like have that on the meal plan? And I'm like, well, that breakfast got you that body, so probably not. Got to change to change. That's the fundamental truth there. So those are the three that happen in circumstances. The next level that people will cast bullshit to, pass their power to, is other people. So to say, I can't do this because of my spouse, I can't do it because of my kids, I can't do it because of my employees, I can't do it because Big Bird, doesn't matter, right? The thing is they will say, I can't make this decision because I'm relying on someone else to make this decision. And there's a fundamental flaw in this, and the big flaw is this, is that if we fast forward the clock 2 years, who are you going to blame for the life that you have? Yourself or the person that you're giving all the power to? Of course, them. And that's not fair to the relationship that you're going to have. And so what you're doing is you're asking for permission when you should be asking for support. Real talk. And so the thing is obviously there's sub ones underneath of that, which is like, hey, do they, they approve of your current situation? If they say, no, they don't approve of it, they're not happy that I'm, feeling this way. It's like, cool, then why would they be against something they already don't approve of? Cool. If the roles were reversed, what do you think would happen? Would you be okay with them doing something to help themselves? Well, why do you think it would be different for them? Right? Like these are all like the simple, like mini overcomes, but the big one is that you're asking for permission instead of support, right? Because you really have to logically play this out. And so once you get someone to say, you know what, you're right, like I need to take control of this. Cool. Now we're talking to somebody who's in charge. All right, which gives you the last circle. And the last circle is avoidance. Is that now, when someone says, I need to think about it, or I'm not sure, at least you're talking to somebody who's in charge, which is amazing. And so if you're a salesperson and someone gives you a circumstance thing, you might be 2 levels that you have to still keep overcoming to get to the gold. Now, if someone says a spouse thing, you might have to overcome that and then still have to overcome an avoidance thing. But if you can think about peeling back the onion from the outside in, then what we're doing is we're not selling, we're giving this person the power to make a decision. And the objective of the sale, and I'm going to say this, I want to just fucking inscribe this in everyone's hearts, is that the point of the sale is not to get them to buy. The point of the sale is to get them to decide. And so if you guys don't know, the definition of decide comes from Latin, which is decidere, which means to literally cut off. And so the question that you ask the prospect is, that's what this word means. And so the question is, which future are we cutting off today? Are we cutting off the future that is more aligned with the dreams that you're trying to accomplish? Or are we cutting off the past that you're trying to step out of? Which path are we cutting off today? Right? We need to make a decision. Right? And so now at this point, when you're in avoidance, you're talking to somebody in power. And so what we have to do is get them to confront. That is the theme of this one. Is that we have to get them to confront the decision, which most of the time just means they don't even know how to make a decision. And so I like to use the frame of past, present, future. And so the past is usually overcoming past worries that they've had, past mistakes they've had. So a simple example is like, hey, I did something like this in the past, it didn't work. I'm afraid of the same thing happening again, right? I call this the burn you twice, which is, hey, did you ever date anybody in middle school? Yes. Are you married to them? No. Did you swear off the entire gender because you had a bad experience? No. Well, because if you did, then you'd be allowing that bad experience to burn you twice. Once when you paid for it and didn't have it work out, and second when it prevented you from meeting the love of your life. And so we can't take that one experience and let it burn you a second time. So that's not a good reason, is it? And then it's like, well, do you think that eventually you're going to need to do this thing, right? This is me getting in the future, but like the more fluid you get with this, the better you'll get. But getting into future is like, do you think you're gonna like be struggling with this forever? Well, no. Okay, well, do you think you're gonna eventually have to do this? Sure. Well, if you're gonna do it eventually, you might as well do it now. Right? And so there's the past, which is about, burning twice. The other thing that you can pull from the past is like, do you think that the reason we're having the conversation right now is because you've had trouble deciding? Do you think you've gotten to this point multiple times in the past you haven't been able to pull the trigger and that's why we're here today? How much is not making this decision cost you up to this point? Is it more than the cost of this? I don't think this is a fast decision because you've been making this decision the last 5 years. Today's just the first day we're taking action on it. Right? So we can keep, you can keep going through, that's all past, right? Present is they admit all that stuff and then now you're in the present with the person. And you have somebody who's in power who shakes off all the shit they've had in the past. You're like, great. Do you know what it takes to make the decision? And usually they'll say no. And you're like, great. There's 3 things that you need to figure out. One is, do you think the product is going to help you solve the problem that you have the way that you want it to be solved? Yes or no? Yes. Great. Do you want to work with me and or us? Yes or no? Great. Do you know someone or have access to the amount of money to get started? Yes or no? If they say yes, then you're like, great, we just made the decision. What card do you want to use? You have to help them make the decision. And if they're still there, then you're like, you know what, if you're anything like me, you're probably afraid of making a mistake. Does that sound fair? What are you most afraid of having happen? Right? What are you afraid of? I think it's one of the most powerful questions in negotiations and sales. Because you're saying, what are you afraid of having happen? Let's play it out, right? And this gets into another close called let's consider the options, right? But say like, let's consider the options. Like worst case scenario, right? I go to Vegas, I take your credit card number, I send it to a Nigerian prince, he maxes everything out, and you don't get the result you want, right? Right, okay. Do you think that's gonna happen? No, okay, well, at least we're not there, right? Okay, so we're getting closer to gold, right? We're getting closer. All right, but what's the real worst case scenario? Well, I just don't wanna fail again. Okay, that's beautiful. What would make you feel like you're not gonna fail again? What would you need to see? And then as soon as they start answering this question, you got them. It doesn't matter. Because the thing is, they're gonna say, I would need to see this and this, and you're like, we already have that. You just didn't know about it because I didn't talk about features earlier because that's not important. What's important is how you feel. Because at the end of the day, like you just have to trust that our intention, because you have to trust the person more than the paper. Right? So you walk them through the process. And so even then, and then you get into future, I wouldn't get into it, but you get the idea here. So big picture, what we're talking, is this valuable for anybody? Is this enjoyable? Because I can talk about sales all day. Can I get some hearts and stuff? Okay, cool. Caleb's telling me, because this could be the ultimate prank because I still can't see the phone. And so right now, in my mind, I'm talking to myself this entire time. So big picture, you have these big concentric circles. From the outside, people will start with the lightest bullshit because it's the easiest thing to cast your power to. I don't have time, I'm too busy, I don't have the money, this doesn't sound like a perfect fit for me. Those are the easy things, right? And we go one step closer to that, which is then is other people, right? And then we say, hey, it's about asking for support, not permission, right? And we explain how in the future they're going to blame them for everything, and that's not fair to them. It's not fair to the relationship. If you want to value the relationship long term, this is what you have to do. You have to own the decision. Cool. Boom. Now we're in the present. And then we go past, present, future. Past, we get them to give up all of the reasons that they failed before as not something that's going to influence today. You teach them how to make a decision, and then you confront their concerns that they might have, and you can talk around them, right? And the easiest one, and I'm still working on creating a framework around this, but I'll share it with you, and you can share it with your sales teams if you like it, is that I'm trying to figure out like a skeleton key overcome. And so there's two that have a high degree, like you can use them in a ton of scenarios, and I've used them all the time, so you can use them for your sales team. Number one is called the reason close. And the reason close is whatever reason they give you, you say, that's the perfect reason you should do this. So if they're like, dude, I don't have the money to start the program, like, that's the exact reason you need to do this program. If they're like, I don't have the time to start the program, like, that's because, like, this is the very reason you need to do the program, right? It doesn't matter what the thing is, you just say, that's the very reason you need to do this, right? So it's called the reason close. The second close is something I'm working on called like the hypothetical close. So you guys have probably heard of like the unicorn close and the 1 to 10 close. Those are all closes that have similar themes around them. And if you're not familiar with that is, the 1 to 10 close is, if this were a 1 and you hated it, on a scale from 1, and that would be Alex, you suck, I hate you, your breath smells, and I never want to see you again. And 10 being like, this is a program that I want to get started today, right? Where are you at? Right? And here's the key. It doesn't matter what number that they say. Let's say they say 6. You say, okay, cool. Well, what would it take to make you a 10? And they literally give you the thing that they said to get a yes. And then you can also flip it and say, why aren't you a 1? And then they start selling you on why it's good. Right? And so that's the 1 to 10 close. The unicorn close is similar, which is just like, hey, if this were some amazing uniform program, would you do it? They say yes. Now, if they say no, then you say, cool, then I don't think we need to talk about this stuff. I feel like there's something else going on. And then you can start attacking the actual, the objection, which is like, you don't trust me. Like, let's talk about that, right? But this is what I'm working on for skeleton key. So I gave you the reason close. The other one is the skeleton key, and so which is the hypothetical close. And so this is what I'm working on. So I'm still figuring this out. But if I said whatever thing they say, so let's say it's time, let's say it's money, doesn't matter. And I say, cool. So time's the issue, right? Okay. So if time weren't the issue, would you do it? You guys see where this is going, right? And then they're like, well, yeah. And you're like, cool. And then we dig in and say, then what would it look like to have time? and then they have to generate the responses. And we're like, oh, cool. Well, that's not going to take that amount of time. And the first thing we're going to do is replace all these activities, which you're spending all your time on, not getting results, and replace it with things that are. Great. Solve the problem. And so what happens is with the hypothetical close, you basically take their obstacle, and you just say, cool, if that obstacle didn't exist, would you do it? Because the thing is once they say yes, you got a hypothetical yes. So all we have to do is match the conditions of the hypothetical yes in the real world, and then we close the deal. And so those are two of the strongest like multi-use closes that work at any point in this whole kind of equation that I like a lot, that I've used like a fair amount. And so you can use those with your team, but just like, hey, sweet. You guys have any more questions? Because I know that was really valuable. That was a good question.
One of the questions is, this was from a while back, but how do you deal with failure?
I don't want this to sound like dismissive as an answer, but like most people just have the wrong, I don't want to say wrong, like I don't feel bad about failure because I don't see failure as bad. And so this chunks up into a larger conversation, which is that most people ascribe labels, positive or negative labels, to situations. And so this again gets into my worldview, which I'm not going to get into, but we have a meaning maker in our heads. And so our entire lives when we're children, we're going around and we're just asking adults, what does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? And we just take whatever they tell us as the meaning for things, right? And the thing is we don't remember every single person who told us what every single thing meant. We just took it as fact. And then later on in our lives, when we have enough other meanings that we can triangulate positions on, we can say, that doesn't make sense. I don't know if that's true. And the problem that most of us have is that we deem failure, and we were told that failure meant that we were a failure. And that's false. Because failure is a necessary part, is a requisite for success. And so here's the thing. This is something I can promise you. If you are not failing right now, you are not going to succeed. It is a requisite. It's a requirement for success. And so how do I feel not bad about failure? Well, if I told you that there was 7 steps to success, let's just say, and you were on step 4, would you feel bad? Of course not. But let's just say that step 4 is failing. All it is just unpacking the label that we've ascribed to this thing and just looking at it for what it really is, which means I made an attempt and I learned something, and then I will incorporate that new learning to take one step closer to what my desired outcome is. And like all of life is a learning process, not to get like too whatever, but like that's what it is. And so the idea is that we see failure as bad. That's the problem. That's all it is. So that's it genuinely, and I hope it doesn't come unrelatable, but like it just doesn't bother me.
Everyone's asking about your next book.
Yeah. It will be done when it is worthy of your attention. And so right now I've written 5 versions end to end of the Leads book. And I'll just tell you guys what the problem is. The problem is that the offers book was such a defined thing that I was fixing that I could create a manual to solve it. And everyone could immediately read it and then 10x the prices, do all these things and improve how much money they're making. When it comes to leads, it's actually a significantly more complex topic. And so it's not just like, how do I do cold calling? How do I do cold emailing? How do I do cold messenger? How do I run ads? How do I do direct mail? How do I make posts? How do I make content? How do I make, like all of those things have to get encapsulated in the book, which I think I've done an okay job of chunking up. But the issue is I wanted it to also be, for me, if you've followed any of my stuff, there's two things, ideally 3, but 2 that are requirements, is that it must be valid and it must be useful. Valid means that it's correct in a large number of scenarios, ideally in all scenarios. That means it has a high degree of validity. Useful means that if I actually do this thing, I will get the desired end goal, even if the why is not true. But if I do these things, I get the end goal. And so I'll give you an example of both. So something that is valid but not useful would be if I said, some things work and some things don't. That is 100% valid. It's also not useful at all, right? And on the flip side, so many sales, marketing, etc. gurus, for example, say like there's 7 stages of awareness, and this is how someone walks through a lead to become a customer. And they start retroactively putting in thoughts into a prospect's mind when we have no way to validate that. Now, if we do the actions that they say in order to sell stuff, it might totally work, but it doesn't mean it's valid. because I might buy something not for those reasons. And so the idea is I need to be both valid, I need to be useful. And the third bonus for me is that it's entertaining. Because if it's valid and useful, then that will make people money. And many self-motivated people will just go through it for those things because they know that this is a cheat code to making money. But if I can get it to be entertaining, then I get more people to consume and ultimately win. So for the book, right now, it is valid, but the utility is lower outside of just baseline understanding how to market conceptually. And so that has been the issue that I'm having because I'm trying to figure out whether I need to write 8 sub-books, which is a lot of work, obviously, and just have one book that explains conceptually how this works. So I'll give you some stuff that this might be interesting for you guys that I had to unpack. What's the difference between promotion, marketing, and advertising? Right? What is a lead? What's a lead? If I get a subscriber on YouTube, is that a lead? If I get a follower on Instagram, is that a lead? What makes it a lead? What makes it not a lead? Well, I'll tell you the definition that I have for the book, which is information that you can leverage to create a transaction. That is a lead. So if I get a subscriber on YouTube, that is not a lead. If I get a follower on Instagram, that is a lead, right? Because I can leverage that conversation to create a transaction. Now you might say, well, the follower on YouTube would maybe buy something. Yes, but after something else happens, right? If they commented and I said, hey, give me your number, now I have the information leverage to create a transaction, right? And so I've been trying to peel these layers back to create, with absolute clarity, something that people who want to get more customers, and the procedure of that is getting more lead flow or deal flow, that they could read the book and immediately execute everything in the book and increase their lead flow. And so that has been the trouble that I've had in trying to encapsulate that simply in a simple book while also accounting for all of the disparate ways that you can generate leads through attention. And so the second big breakthrough that I had was something that I call the advertising cycle, which you'll have to read the book. But basically, I made 58 broken models to get this to work the way I needed it to. And I would consider this the value equation of this book. And so I am working on it. It just, because we're also running acquisition.com and actually growing the business and whatnot, writing the book takes time. And I just won't put out a product that I don't think is deserving of your attention. And so I will always hold that as the hard line. And so I promise that when it is done, it will be worthy of it to the best of my human ability. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the first live ever Q&A of Solo. If you guys can give Caleb a shout out, because this was all his idea, and if no one's there, I will blame him and I will have won the bet that I've been talking to myself for this entire time. But anyways, Moses Nation, I love you guys. If you, for some reason, are new on here, we have a book that's 99 cents that a lot of people are referencing. I think it's 5,000 5-star reviews on Amazon. It's 99 cents if you want to check it out. A lot of people get value from it. The podcast is, you're a podcast listener. We have a podcast that encapsulates a lot of this stuff at a higher level. I don't sell anything. The whole reason acquisition.com exists is because I'm trying to help businesses that are doing 3 million or more. And so if you are a business that's doing 3 million or more and you're on the internet, love to work with you. Hop on acquisition.com, fill out the form. We'd love to help you get to 30 million and beyond. We've done it 6 times already, so we're pretty good at it, especially for this type of business. But if you're below 3 million and you're not in that industry, or you're below 3 million and you're in that industry, that's why we make the book. We make YouTube, we make Twitter content, we make Instagram content, and I'm just trying to give everybody the tools they need to that I wish I had earlier on. Not saying they're right, I'm just saying they've worked for me. So anyways, appreciate you, Mosey Nation. You guys, I don't deserve you, but I am grateful for you nonetheless. So thank you guys. I'll see you guys in the next Instagram Live.